For 70 years, the social contract of the Western world was built on a single, tangible promise. It was the promise that if you worked hard, saved your money, and followed the rules, you could buy a piece of land, you could own a home. This wasn't just about shelter, it was about autonomy. It was the primary vehicle for building generational wealth and the only thing standing between the individual and the state. We called it the American dream. But in 2025, we need to be honest with ourselves. The dream is dead. It didn't die of natural causes, it was murdered. If you look at the housing market today, you might think we are just in a bad cycle. You might think that interest rates are too high or supply is too low and that eventually things will return to normal. You would be wrong. What we are witnessing is not a market cycle. It is a structural shift in the ownership of the planet. We are transitioning from a society of owners to a society of tenants. This is the Neo-Feudalism Protocol. To understand the gravity of this, we have to look at the math. In the 1950s, the average home cost roughly 2 times the average annual salary. A factory worker could support a family and pay off a mortgage in 10 years. Today, the median home price is nearly 8 times the median income. In major cities, it is 15 or 20 times. The ladder has been pulled up, but who pulled it up? We are told it is a supply issue. We are told we just need to build more houses. But that is a lie. We have more houses per capita today than we did in 1950. The problem is that there aren't enough homes. The problem is that a new class of buyer has entered the market. A buyer with infinite pockets. A buyer who doesn't need a mortgage. A buyer who never intends to sell. For the first time in history, the average family isn't competing against other families. They are competing against sovereign wealth funds, pension funds, and private equity giants with trillions of dollars in assets under management. Imagine playing a game of Monopoly. You sit down at the board with your small pile of cash, but the player across from you starts with the bank's entire vault. Before you can even roll the dice, they have bought Boardwalk, Park Place, and all the railroads. Then they look at you and say, you can still play, but now you have to rent every square you land on. That is the housing market in 2025. The shift began quietly after the 2008 financial crisis. When the housing market collapsed, millions of Americans were foreclosed upon. Banks were holding thousands of toxic assets, homes they didn't want. The government needed a bailout solution. So they invited Wall Street in. They allowed hedge funds to buy single-family homes in bulk, thousands at a time, at pennies on the dollar. At the time, they said it was a temporary fix to stabilize the market. They said they would sell them back to families eventually. They lied. They didn't sell them back. They turned them into rental portfolios. They realized something terrifyingly profitable. A population that cannot buy is forced to rent. And a population that is forced to rent creates a permanent, guaranteed revenue stream that never ends. This was the birth of the build-to-rent revolution. And it changed the economic DNA of the West. We are now watching the systematic elimination of the middle-class homeowner. The goal isn't to provide housing. The goal is to turn housing into a subscription service. Just like you subscribe to Netflix, just like you lease your phone, you will subscribe to the roof over your head. And if you stop paying, your subscription is canceled. This returns us to a structure we haven't seen since the Middle Ages. In feudalism, the lord owned the land, and the serf worked the land. The serf paid the lord for the privilege of existing. The serf owned nothing. We thought we had escaped that system. We thought democracy and capitalism had set us free. But look around you. The lords are back. They just changed their names from duke and baron to asset manager and equity partner. And the serfs? That's us. To understand how this takeover works, we have to look at the mechanism. How does a corporation buy a neighborhood? It starts with the cost of capital. If you want to buy a house, you have to go to a bank. You have to prove your income. You have to pay an interest rate that is set by the Federal Reserve. If rates are high, like they are now, you can't afford the loan, you are locked out. But BlackRock, Vanguard, State Street, and the massive private equity firms do not play by your rules. They have access to capital markets that you do not. They can borrow billions of dollars at near zero rates, or they use the cash from your own 401ks and pension funds. This creates an asymmetry that destroys the market. Let's say a 3-bedroom house comes up for sale in a suburb of Atlanta or Phoenix. You, a young couple, put in an offer. It's a stretch, but you offer the asking price. An hour later, the seller gets another offer. It is 20% over the asking price. It is all cash, no inspection required. Closing in 48 hours, the seller takes the cash offer. Who wouldn't? You lose the house, but who bought it? You assume it's a rich person, but it's not a person at all. It's an LLC masked by a shell company, owned by a fund managed by an algorithm. This algorithm is designed to identify high-yield neighborhoods. It scans the country for areas with good schools and safe streets, the exact places families want to live. It targets starter homes. It sweeps them up, does a cosmetic renovation, and puts them back on the market the next week, but not for sale, for rent. and the rent is 30% higher than the mortgage would have been. This is happening on an industrial scale. In some zip codes in Atlanta, Charlotte, and Jacksonville, institutional investors bought over 30% of all homes sold in a single year. They are cornering the market. Once they own a critical mass of homes in a neighborhood, they gain pricing power. If one company owns 50 homes in a subdivision, they effectively set the market rent. If they raise the rent by $500, you have no choice. You can't move to the house next door because they own that one too. This is the monopolization of shelter. But it gets darker. These companies are now partnering with home builders directly. It's called built for rent. Historically, builders built subdivisions to sell to families. But selling one house at a time is slow. It involves real estate agents, showings, and financing falling through. Now, builders are bypassing you entirely. They build a community of 200 homes and sell the entire neighborhood in a single transaction to a rental giant. The for sale sign never even goes up in the yard. The neighborhood goes from dirt to rental without a single family having a chance to bid. You are being erased from the equation. This is why you feel like you are running on a treadmill. You are saving money for a down payment, but the target keeps moving. Every time you save another $1,000, the institutional money bids the price up by $5,000. They are using the Cantillon effect against you. The money printed by the Federal Reserve flows to Wall Street first. They use that fresh money to buy hard assets like land and housing before the inflation hits the street. By the time the money reaches you in the form of wages, the prices have already doubled. They are buying the lifeboat while you're still swimming. And this is not accidental. It is a business model described in their own investor prospectuses. They call it the rentership society. They view the decline of homeownership not as a tragedy, but as a secular tailwind for their profits. They are betting against you, and right now, they are winning. We have to ask the uncomfortable question: what is the end game? What happens when a society loses the ability to own property? We don't have to guess. The World Economic Forum gave us the slogan in 2016: you will own nothing, and you will be happy. People mocked this. They called it a conspiracy theory. But look at the trajectory. It wasn't a command, it was a prediction based on the data we are discussing right now. The Neo-Feudalist model is about control. When you own a home, you have a castle. You can paint the walls, you can plant a garden, you can invite who you want. You have a fixed cost of living for 30 years. Inflation doesn't hurt your mortgage payment. In fact, inflation helps you because it makes your debt cheaper while your asset rises in value. Ownership is freedom. When you rent, you're vulnerable. You're subject to the rules of the landlord. In a corporate-owned neighborhood, those rules are set by a compliance department in New York. They can tell you what breed of dog you can own. They can install smart home technology that monitors your temperature and usage. They can raise your rent every year to match inflation, keeping you perpetually on the edge of poverty. But the psychological impact is even worse. A society of renters is a society of transients. When you don't own, you don't invest in your community. You don't care about the school board elections because you might move next year. You don't fix the fence because it's not your fence. The social fabric unravels. We are creating a permanent underclass, a renter zero generation. This generation will reach retirement age with zero assets. The primary savings vehicle for the middle class has always been home equity. You pay off your house for 30 years, and when you retire, you live rent-free or you sell it to pay for your care. If you rent for 40 years, you reach age 65 with nothing. You have paid $500,000 to a landlord and have zero equity to show for it. What happens then? You become fully dependent on the state. If you can't pay the rent with your pension, you need a government voucher. You need a subsidy. And this is the trap. The corporate landlords know that eventually people won't be able to afford the rent. So who will pay it? The government. We are moving toward a system where the government issues Section 8 vouchers to the middle class, which are then paid directly to BlackRock and Vanguard. It is a wealth transfer from the taxpayer to the asset manager, with the citizen functioning merely as the tenant in the middle. It creates a perfect closed loop of extraction. The government prints money, gives it to you, you give it to the corporation, and the corporation buys more politicians to keep the system going. This is why they don't want housing prices to crash. A crash would allow you to enter the market. They want stability. They want slow, grinding appreciation that keeps ownership just out of your reach forever. The Neo-Feudalism Protocol is not about housing. It is about power. It is about creating a population that is rootless, assetless, and dependent. A population that owns nothing is a population that can be easily managed. So, is it over? Is the American dream officially buried? The trajectory is clear, but the future is not yet written. However, you need to understand that the cavalry is not coming. The government is not going to save you. The Federal Reserve is not going to save you. They are the architects of this system. If you want to escape the neo-feudalist trap, you have to act now. You have to stop playing their game and start playing a different one. First, you must understand that waiting for a crash to buy a prime home in a major city is a dangerous strategy. The institutions have deeper pockets than you. If prices drop 20%, they will buy even more. The escape route lies in the areas they cannot operationalize. The algorithms of Wall Street need density. They need neat cookie-cutter subdivisions where they can manage 100 units with one maintenance crew. They do not want land. They do not want rural areas. They do not want homes that require complex work. This is your window. The Exodus strategy. You need to look where the institutions are not looking. This means moving further out. This means buying raw land. This means buying older homes that need sweat equity. Ownership is the only shield. Even if it is a small shack on 2 acres of dirt, it is yours. It is a foothold on the planet that is not a subscription service. You must prioritize ownership over lifestyle. The trap of the modern world is that it convinces you to rent a luxury apartment in the city center because it is convenient, while you sacrifice the ability to build equity. That convenience is the bait. Reject the amenities, reject the status, buy the asset. Furthermore, we must understand the political reality. A nation of renters votes differently than a nation of owners. Renters vote for rent control, subsidies, and state intervention. Owners vote for property rights and low taxes. The corporate giants know this. They are betting that as the percentage of renters increases, the political will to protect private property will vanish. They are betting that you will eventually vote to destroy your own ability to own in exchange for capped rents. Do not fall for it. The Neo-Feudalism Protocol is the greatest threat to individual liberty in the 21st century. It is not a war fought with guns. It is a war fought with deed titles and interest rates. They want you to accept the subscription life. They want you to own nothing and be happy. But happiness without agency is just a comfortable cage. The door is closing. The prices are rising. The institutions are buying. If you are waiting for the perfect moment, you are waiting to be a serf. Secure your ground. Buy your freedom. Because when the history books are written about this era, there will only be 2 classes of people, the ones who pay the rent and the ones who collect it. Which one will you be? I'm Tom, and this is The Wealth Collapse. Subscribe now to stay ahead of the curve, because when the history books are written, you'll want to be one of the few who saw it coming.